Find the x-intercepts of the polynomial function. F of x equals 2x cubed plus 7x squared plus 7x plus 2. In order to find x-intercepts, the first thing we need to do is identify the zeros of the polynomial. And the zeros we get by factoring the polynomial into linear factors and setting each of those equal to 0 and solving. Any of those values that happen to be real numbers are the x-intercepts. In order to factor, the process that we set forth in the class is to graph the polynomial and look for any initial zeros that we can. So we'll take 2x cubed plus 7x squared plus 7x plus 2 and graph it in the standard viewing window. So I'm going to hit zoom and 6 to get the standard viewing window. Now, we're looking for initial integer values of zeros. If you can get them all from the graph, that's fine. So I'm going to zoom in on this region because this is where I would see the zeros of my polynomial. So I'm looking for where it's going to cross or touch the x-axis. So I'll use a zoom box here to kind of zoom in on that particular region. And zoom box is nice because you move your cursor to one location, press enter, and then drag it further, and it sets up this rectangle, and wherever you do this rectangle, this will be the new viewing window. So you're really just zooming in on that particular region. Okay, so a couple of these zeros are pretty straightforward to identify. Certainly right here looks like this would be -1, -2. So it looks like -2 would be a 0. We can, of course, prove that through synthetic division. So let's take this polynomial and use synthetic division. Bring the 2 down, this would be -4. If we add this column, that's 3. 3 times -2 is -6. The sum of this column is 1. 1 times -2 is -2. So we get a remainder of 0, and that's perfect because that shows that this really was a 0. Now, these are the coefficients of a quadratic, which we could just factor at this point, but in fact, it actually is pretty easy to identify another 0, I think at -1. So I could take the 0 of -1, factor it out of the remaining quadratic, bring the 2 down. 2 times -1 is -2. The sum of this column is 1. 1 times -1 is -1. And this adds up to 0 as well. So now this is a linear because this is a constant and this coefficient is times x. So I have the remaining 0 as the solution to 2x plus 1 equals 0, or 2x equals -1, or x equals -1/2. Since all three of these values are real numbers, those are the x-intercepts. So we'll just list them. The x-intercepts here are -1/2, -2, and -1. Now, if you need to write those as points, that's fine as well. The thing about x-intercepts is that the y value is always 0. So you would just take each of these and express it as a coordinate pair with the y value being 0. Sometimes it's required to write it as a point. Sometimes you can just list the actual numbers themselves. Just follow the instructions in whatever question you're answering.